Welcome to Bite Size Bunny. My name's Tony, and today we are going to be doing a tier list for That's right, we are going to be ranking all 14 installments in the Assassin's Creed franchise until we are able to determine which one is the best. So without much further ado, let's get to it. Assassin's Creed, the game that started it all. The first Assassin's Creed is one of those games where the concept is significantly better than the execution. I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a really flawed one that thankfully did well enough to get another chance to really improve upon its foundation and turn this franchise into something truly special. I like Altair and Desmond. I think the opening sequence does a really good job at selling you on the idea of what's to come. But even when this game initially came out, I remember it feeling dated. I'm going to be putting the first Assassin's Creed in C tier. This is how you do a sequel. Assassin's Creed 2 learned from its previous game and innovated upon the gameplay in such a way that it completely reinvented the franchise in the best way possible. Not only does the gameplay in AC2 get a major overhaul, making it feel really good and giving the franchise a much needed glow up, but then you also get Ezio Auditore, and this character oozes charisma. You instantly fall in love with Ezio, and it's really easy to see why he got a whole ass trilogy. Assassin's Creed 2 is going up there into S tier. The only Assassin's Creed game better than AC2 is Brotherhood. This is a perfect continuation of Ezio's story. The concept of recruiting assassins and calling them in to help you during various combat scenarios is dope, and it really lets the gameplay shine even more here. But then on top of an awesome campaign, in this game you get the introduction of the Assassin's Creed multiplayer mode. And let me tell ya, this is the most underrated multiplayer mode out there. It's this brilliant game of cat and mouse that is so much fun to play, and actually trying to find creative ways to outsmart enemy players was always such a joy. I'm going to be putting Assassin's Creed Brotherhood in S tier right above AC2. Alright, for the record, I have not played this game since it initially released all those years ago, so maybe this is a title that I need to revisit sometime in 2025. But I've always felt that Assassin's Creed Revelations was the weakest installment in Ezio's trilogy. It's not a bad game, not even a little. But at this point, I do remember feeling like Ezio's story was kind of being drug out a little too long, and wishing that the Ezio trilogy remained a duology. The character is still great, the gameplay and multiplayer is still a lot of fun. It just didn't really innovate upon the previous two titles to really make it stand out all that much in comparison to those previous two games. I'm gonna be putting Assassin's Creed Revelations up there into B tier. Assassin's Creed 3 was a damn good installment in the Assassin's Creed franchise. And for the longest time, I really did believe that this series should have ended after this game, or at least gone on an incredibly long hiatus. Connor is easily one of my favorite protagonists in Assassin's Creed. He's right up there with Ezio for me. I loved the American Revolutionary War setting, and Connor's story was so well crafted. Really, my biggest issue with AC3 is the ending of Desmond's story. It feels so rushed and anticlimactic. I remember being genuinely mad about the ending of this game back when I initially beat it. But hey, everything else is top notch. I'm gonna be putting Assassin's Creed 3 up there into A tier. Alright, bit of a hot take here, but I personally didn't really care for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I completely understand why so many other people love it. It just wasn't for me personally. I can acknowledge it's a well-crafted game. Personally, my biggest drawbacks here are, first of all, I don't really like ship combat to begin with in video games, so the naval combat being such a major component here was a real turnoff for me. And the other being, I found Edward Kenway to be such an unlikable protagonist. I didn't find him all that interesting, and I thought he was easily the weakest protagonist in the series up to this point. Everyone that came before him is so much more interesting. And the Assassin's Creed elements, especially the Abstergo stuff, feel so forced in here. It would have been cool if Ubisoft actually took Black Flag, removed all of the Assassin's Creed stuff that already feels tacked on here, and just made this its own unique original IP and rolled with it. Imagine if they dropped the Assassin's Creed and just made this Black Flag, turned it into its own pirate trilogy, instead of making us wait a decade for Skull and Bones, which is clearly inspired by Black Flag, but doesn't even hold a candle to being as high quality as that game, making Skull and Bones one of the biggest letdowns in gaming. Oh well, I'm personally gonna be putting Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag into C tier. I'm gonna put it right above the first Assassin's Creed. This feels like a watered-down version of Assassin's Creed 4 in every single way. While I didn't like Edward, I at least remembered him. The main character in Assassin's Creed Rogue, on the other hand, is completely forgettable. This entire game is just a crappier version of Assassin's Creed 4. There's nothing really all that exciting to talk about here. But hey, it's not the worst, so I'm gonna be putting Assassin's Creed Rogue into D tier. What are the names of the characters in this game? I don't know, but man, is it a lot of fun to play. Not only does Unity have the best feeling parkour in the series, but it also gave us the introduction of the very short-lived co-op mode. The fact that they didn't have co-op in more of these games absolutely boggles my mind. It was so much fun here in Unity. The combat and movement feel great. I also really like the setting and the customization that's available. Really, Unity's weakness is its forgettable story and its broken launch. Thankfully, it did get better over time, and I do have a bunch of fond memories attached to this one. Also, shout out to that cinematic trailer that had Lord's cover of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I remember seeing that trailer for the very first time and getting goosebumps. I'm gonna be putting Assassin's Creed Unity in A tier right below Assassin's Creed 3. Syndicate doesn't get enough love. I feel like this game is rarely acknowledged, which is an absolute shame because it's one of the best installments in the series. I really loved the time period they chose here, and I really loved the setting they crafted for this game. They also did a good job at expanding upon the gameplay and movement that was already established in Unity. Not to mention, we got the addition of the dual protagonist system that was implemented really well in this game. Again, the story is kind of forgettable, but the characters are pretty fun this time around. I'm gonna be putting Syndicate into A tier right above Assassin's Creed 3. I never was able to get into the RPG installments in this franchise, mainly because they barely feel like Assassin's Creed. While I will say Odyssey is easily the best of the bunch and had the most potential, mainly because I love the setting and Cassandra is a great character, it still wasn't enough to make me want to push through and see it to the end. These games really don't feel like Assassin's Creed games. Instead, they kind of feel like a weird smorgasbord of a bunch of other really successful game franchises from that time, and it feels like the AC franchise just had a full-blown identity crisis. All three of these games have elements that could have made for interesting new IPs if Ubisoft actually wanted to do something new and creative, but instead the Assassin's Creed name is kind of just tacked on here, and it does more harm than good. The AC elements always feel so out of place, especially narratively speaking, which makes it really hard to care about anything that's going on. Again, just to clarify, I did fall off of all of these games after a certain point. I never saw any of them through to the end. I just didn't have it in me to try and push through their overly bloated open worlds and stories. But for the people that do like these games, I get it. It's just not my cup of tea. I'm gonna be putting Assassin's Creed Odyssey in C tier right above Assassin's Creed 4, and then I'm gonna be putting Origins and Valhalla below 4 above 1. I almost forgot about you, Assassin's Creed Mirage, but thankfully I did it, because we need something to go into F tier. I remember when the big marketing push for this game was that it was supposed to be a return to form for Assassin's Creed. They were going to go back to their stealth roots, and it was going to be more in the same vein as those early Assassin's Creed titles. But man, did they drop the ball in that regard, not to mention, it just feels like such a soulless experience. This game is so forgettable, I almost forgot to include it on the tier list, but yeah, Assassin's Creed Mirage, welcome to that F tier where you'll probably be staying alone. Assassin's Creed Shadows is the Assassin's Creed game Ubisoft should have released after Desmond's story ended in 3. The long-awaited feudal Japan Assassin's Creed game is finally here all these years later, and it was absolutely worth the wait. They absolutely knocked this game out of the park. Yasuke and Naoe are both great protagonists, and the gameplay feels like the perfect balance between both the old and the new Assassin's Creed. The combat is so fun and addictive that I found it extremely easy to play through this 30+ hour story, even when it had some pacing issues and dips in quality with the writing. Really, the biggest issue with this game that holds it back for me is that third act. It feels very rushed and slapped together. Even though the third act has some really interesting and intriguing concepts introduced into the story, I think it really would have benefited from taking that third act and actually turning it into its own game. They could have easily have given Yasuke and Naoe their own trilogy of games, and I would have been thrilled. I had a wonderful time with this game. It's easily in my top 3 for the series, and I'm going to be putting Assassin's Creed Shadows up there into A tier right above Syndicate. And there is my final ranking for every mainline Assassin's Creed game in the franchise. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And what's your favorite and least favorite Assassin's Creed game? I'd love to know.